Hey everybody, welcome to the HooperCast. This week is a little bit different, but hopefully it won't sound terribly different. We could not get together to actually record this week, so this is kind of what I affectionately refer to as a pre-rec. Even though all the episodes are pre-recorded, this will feel even more so because we're not going to be talking to each other. We still have content for you, we just couldn't schedule it this week. So what we did instead is I had everybody just record their stuff separately and then just send it to me to paste in here. What I'm going to play for you first is John saw the Entourage movie and he has a review of it, so that's what we're going to have up first. And then later in the show, I've got a documentary for you about Paul Newman, and we've got some TV season finales to talk about too. So here's John with the Entourage movie.
Okay. Here's some quick thoughts from me on the Entourage movie, which just came out last Friday. I was excited for this movie because I was a big fan of the Entourage television series, but I hadn't really kept up with it and didn't get to see the last couple of seasons of the show. So one of my concerns about this movie was, will I be able to understand what's going on? How will the show directly impact the movie? And first of all, the film is based on the television series, but if you were only a casual fan of the show, you can go into this movie and pick up on most things. There are a few things that come directly from the TV series that are continued over into the movie. But if you're a casual viewer or even a new viewer, you don't have to have seen the last couple of seasons of the show to understand what's going on. Which I thought was a good way to kind of keep the film broad. If you aren't familiar with the show, there's a recap of kind of each of the characters in the show and what their role is and what they've been up to. So even if you're not familiar with a lot about the show, you're going to get a good sense of who the characters are and you know what they do in terms of the core of the show. Speaking of the core of the show, to me, Entourage was always kind of this goofy, satirical look at the film industry and the film business and what goes into making a film. It's based around kind of this actor who is, in a way, notoriously difficult and his friends that he surrounds himself with. So, first and foremost, the show is always about that for me. And I think in recent years it's kind of taken on this form of this bro TV show. And a lot of people link it to that kind of bro culture. And to me, Entourage was never that. And so the fact that it has that stigma is kind of bizarre to me. The core of the show is these five friends who are best friends and bros, I guess. But to me, the show was never, ever involved in bro culture or anything like that. So to me, Entourage is not that. It's more of a fun look at a what-if look at the film business. As I said, there are five central characters in the show and in the film. The main character is Vince, who is an actor, and in this film, Vince's career has gone through these ups and downs. He's tasked with directing kind of a comeback movie for himself, which is also going to star in. His best friend is Eric, also known as E. He's his best friend and manager. Vince's brother is Johnny Chase. He also goes by Drama in the show. He's a struggling actor, kind of a washed-up has-been actor who is getting a small but pivotal part in the film that Vince is directing. Turtle was Vince's driver, but in the last couple of seasons of the show, he's become a millionaire by licensing tequila. So he's rich now. And Ari, who was Vince's agent and is now the head of a studio. So Ari has tasked Vince with directing and starring in this movie, and both of their careers are on the line. The basic breakdown of the characters that I just went over kind of explains one of the problems that this movie had to address was coming up with a way to engage all five of these characters in a way that didn't feel forced and in a way that didn't shortchange anyone over the course of an hour and 45 minutes, which is typically about 2 episodes of the show. So they had to do all of that in the span of time without shortchanging one of these characters. And I think they did a really good job of balancing the film between these 5 friends and giving them each something to do, something interesting, and then in the end kind of tying it back into the central focus of the film, which is Vince's movie. So all of these characters have something tied up in this movie. You know, that's kind of the driving force of the whole film, because throughout the movie we're seeing various people trying to shut it down, various people trying to discredit Vince, get him off the movie, and so all of these characters are involved in that central plot, and they're all given fairly equal screen time, and I thought they did a really good job of doing justice to each character and kind of continuing their storylines without giving the spotlight to one character or 2 of them or whatever. Speaking of many characters in the film, there are many cameos by various celebrities in the film. I would say there's at least 20 to 25 cameos in the film. It's insane, and a couple of them may have felt a little forced, but I think for the most part they kind of came and went and maybe said a line or 2 and then went away, and it felt pretty natural because, like I said, the whole show and the film takes place within the film business, so the characters are constantly walking through backlots, walking through producers' offices and producers' buildings, and the streets of LA and house parties and all that sort of stuff. So it would be commonplace to see these celebrities out and about. So it makes sense. The cameos are funny. The show had cameos a lot. That was kind of one of its earmarks. So it makes sense for that to carry over into the film. Another thing that I wasn't expecting but was a pleasant surprise was the film was not really focused on laughs. The show was more focused on the plot and kind of fleshing out the characters a little bit more. It was a funny film. I would call it a comedy, but it was more of a dramedy than I was expecting. Like I said, the whole plot revolves around shutting down this movie and their attempts to block anyone trying to stop the film from happening. So that is the main focus of the film. And there are several gags and laughs and jokes throughout, but that is really the focus of the film. And it was a nice change of pace because I always thought the show worked best with the plot elements, with the twists and turns that the story took and the characters took in the show. So it was nice to see that carry over into the movie, where it would be very easy to just flat out make a comedy movie that has a pretty thin plot. And not to say that this plot is some Oscar-worthy, well-written plot, but it holds up throughout the course of the story pretty well, I think. And the last thing I'll say is this may be the last look we ever get at these characters in this world, and if that's the case, then I'm pretty happy with how it ended up. I think the film ends on a good note for everyone and kind of takes the viewers back full circle from kind of the roots of the television show, and kind of gives us a look back and a look forward at the same time. And each of these characters ends up in a good place, and it ends in a neat way, but not in a way that feels forced, because they may have known it would be the last outing. I don't know, but it feels like it should feel, and maybe that's ambiguous of me to say, but maybe that's vague, but it ends on a good note. I don't think fans of the show will be disappointed in the movie. If you like the show, I think you'll like the movie. It's kind of more of the same, so don't be expecting something different. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Bye.
All right, hey guys, it's me again. I'd like to tell you guys about this documentary. It is not theatrically out. I don't know if they even do that with documentaries. Okay, so the movie is called Winning: The Racing Life of Paul Newman. It's a documentary by Adam Carolla, primarily. It's directed by Adam Carolla and Nate Adams. And that might surprise some people because most people who know Adam Carolla probably think back to The Man Show. That's probably the most popular thing he's done with at least people my age. Adam's done a bunch of stuff. He currently hosts a very popular podcast And one of the things he's been doing lately, whenever he can, is make movies. He just made a narrative film called Road Hard, starring himself, about stand-up comedy on the road, which I also recommend. But I'm here to talk about this documentary, which of the two films he just did, this is a much better, more interesting film, I guess. But it's also very different. I mean, this is a look at the second half of Paul Newman's life. I mean, everybody knew that Paul Newman obviously is a award-winning actor, and he makes the salad dressing. But when Paul Newman was 47 and he was training to do this movie Winning, he was training to drive race cars, and he sort of got bitten by the racing bug. And so what this movie explores is that whole side of his life. People kept describing Paul Newman like, oh, well, he's but he's the actor, and he's going to go off and do this crazy racing thing. And everyone kind of thought he was nuts but he wanted to be taken seriously as a driver. He went out and practiced, and he did all the legwork, and he worked to understand the cars, and he made all the mistakes, and he really went from the ground up with this thing, and then he started winning races, and he started getting respected by other drivers and legitimate drivers. And and I think, what does it say here? Let me make sure I have my stats right. He raced for 35 years, and he won 4 national championships as a driver, and then another 8 championships as an owner. And he started racing at 47 years old. So this is a really interesting film because it's about a guy that you might recognize, but it's this whole side of his life that you didn't even maybe realize that he had. He actually was more passionate about racing, it seems, than he was about acting. It was this thing that sort of popped up on the side for him, and then that sort of became the only thing he really wanted to do. I can't speak for him, but they've got friends of his in here. They have his brother, people who worked with him racing. I mean, this is a real authentic look at this guy. Adam Carolla personally owns several of Paul Newman's race cars. He buys them and restores them. He's also a celebrity who's taken seriously as a race car driver. He's won he's run some big championships himself. One of the subjects in the documentary is Patrick Dempsey, who people might know from Grey's Anatomy, also a professional driver. So this is a little more common than you might think for actors to have these sort of side passions, but it really is this exhilarating thing for them. And so it's kind of nice to have Adam Carolla, who has the same who has this same love for racing. You want somebody like that in the director's chair who knows how to talk to all these people, and he also knows the kind of story. He also knows how to tell this kind of a story. You can't really get just some guy in here to direct this film and expect them to have the eye for detail that a driver would have. And you can't expect drivers to talk to somebody who doesn't know shit about racing cars. It's a real detailed look at this world, and it's not too long. It's about 80 minutes, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. And it's a really enjoyable watch. So I'd fully recommend Winning: The Racing Life of Paul Newman. You can rent it on iTunes or Amazon.com or video on demand. I think you can get through DirecTV to other video on demand services. So it's readily available. Watch it with a good pair of headphones or some good speakers, because the sound really plays a part in the experience of this movie. So great documentary. It won't kill an afternoon for you. It's a nice story. So I'm going to toss it to Dustin now, and he's going to talk about some TV shows for you guys. So take it away, Dustin.
Hello, everybody. Dustin here. What I'm going to talk about today is actually The Flash and Arrow. So The Flash just finished up its first season, and The Arrow finished up its third season. These shows have been off the air now for about a month. We're in about a month into the hiatus, and you're probably all wondering, should I investigate these shows? And to that I would say yes. Yes, you should. You definitely should be. What I'm going to do real quick is just sort of talk about The Flash, and I'm going to keep it kind of broad, keep it kind of vague. I want you guys to experience it the way that I did, which was week to week. I didn't know what was going to happen. I stayed away from any sort of spoilers, and so I'm going to try to keep that experience alive for you guys. So we'll just start at the first episode here. So The Flash starts with a young forensic scientist for the Central City Police Force. His name is Barry Allen, and he becomes the Flash due to a particle accelerator explosion in Central City, which seems to also be giving powers to a lot of people in the area. And so Flash now has to fight these metahumans, they're called, people who are exhibiting a certain superpower, and the Flash has to sort of hone his abilities with the help of his friends and keep his identity secret from the girl that he loves, Iris. Yeah, I mean, it's standard superhero fare, but here's, I think, what sets it apart from other superhero shows, certainly, and even the movies, too, is its lighthearted tone. Sort of at the beginning, I thought of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films, because there's like I think you'll probably think of it first because there's a voiceover, sort of like, hey, I'm Barry Allen, you want to know why, and he's talking to himself, kind of the way the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies start, with the whole goofy, like, who am I? Are you sure you want to know? My story is not for the faint of heart, and all that good stuff. So The Flash starts very similarly to that, and it introduces us into this kind of colorful world with fun characters and sort of over-the-top kind of performances. And I think that it sets it apart for that reason, because I think, especially when it comes to DC Comics, for some reason they're taking this dark and grim approach, and this show definitely is not that. So while The Flash is not that, it certainly goes all over the board in terms of, okay, in this episode we're going to be very sci-fi, here's time travel. And then in this episode we're going to be really kind of dramatic. And in this episode you're going to see some comedy. And I like that variety, tuning in week to week and not really knowing what I'm going to get. I think it's a great way to kind of hook the audience, because I'll just compare it to Arrow really quick. So Arrow, when you tune in for an episode of Arrow, you're going to get some soap opera-y kind of performances and some close-ups and some secrets and all that good stuff. And it's fine, and you know what you're going to get, but you can tire from that very easily. You can get bored, but The Flash is not that. So anyway, I said I was going to keep this short, but basically The Flash does not have that. It also has a good mystery. They set up this character and they start kind of saying, who is he really? And that kind of keeps you going. It's a good hook. And the answers to that question unfold naturally, and they unfold in ways that you aren't expecting. And I like that. And I like the fact that the answers unfold, because you look at something like Lost, where, yeah, it's, a mystery show, but man, does it suck at giving answers. So anyway, The Flash gives these answers and does a really great job of creating a colorful world with bright characters and just a general feeling of fun. So for that reason, I would certainly say give it a shot. As for how it wrapped up this season, I think it wrapped up one of the best, if not the best, season of superhero television I've ever seen. Not only do the mysteries play out, and not only do we get a good sense of finality and conclusion from those storylines, but it opens some interesting new possibilities for the next season and teases just the right amount of season 2 at the end here. So the finale is, in every possibly good way, a culmination of what we've seen so far this season. And I feel like a lot of times superhero shows have a tendency to be like, okay, here's the final boss, and then you fight him and things go back to normal. Or even, the final boss isn't revealed yet, so at the season finale cliffhanger, we have, the guy who's been in the shadows finally step into the light, or maybe he doesn't. And so there's no sense of finality. But here, to be fair, you could end the series here. And there are some unanswered questions going into season 2, but But story-wise, character-wise, a lot of the things that we've been dealing with are closed, so they have sort of new paths to tread for season 2, and I like that. So I would say definitely give The Flash a shot, especially if you're hungering for something different from your superhero stories. Hooper and I talked about Daredevil in another podcast episode, so go check that out. But Daredevil is one of those shows, again, where it's like every episode you kind of know what you're going to get. It's going to be dark. It's going to be grim. It's going to be mobsters and shady back alley dealings. The Flash, like I said, is just variety. It's just something great. And it has some great guest stars and some great twists and turns, and its characters are unique. And characters like, Cisco, who may be more of a comedic relief, is very different from somebody like Ronnie Raymond, who has this own weirdly unique storyline. And I like that. Whereas in Daredevil, and you could say this was maybe storytelling maturity, but in Daredevil, everything's kind of connected. Everything's kind of all about the same thing. So if you're not super into that one thing, you're going to have a hard time getting through the series. So there again, the Flash's variety kind of helps you latch onto something. So that's good. Now let's talk about Arrow. I have a little less to say about Arrow. I know I've talked about it a little bit before on the podcast, so bear with me. So what I'll say, first of all, if you are tuning into The Flash, you will probably do like I did and say, man, I should be watching Arrow, because The Flash is a spinoff of Arrow and you're going to want to kind of keep up. Well, they do a really good job of not relying on Arrow, and even though he shows up probably 4 or 5 times in this first season of The Flash, you don't really have to know a whole lot. They do a good job of explaining things, even for the uninitiated. But if you're like me and you're kind of a completist, then you're going to want to go check out Arrow. And in that case, let me go ahead and break it down for you. Season 1 is really good. It'll take a minute to get into, especially if you're unfamiliar with the way the CW works and the soap opera-y kind of everybody's attractive way of whatever they do. Or if you are very familiar with Green Arrow, then you're going to be kind of leery of this because they change a good bit of the mythology. And that's one of the reasons I had a hard time latching on to Arrow at first. Arrow Season 1 is good television. Arrow Season 2 is even better television. They take everything that was great, the formula, the format of the show. They also take the performances and the characters in new and exciting directions in the second season. And everything is connected to Oliver. So the main villain is a very personal thing for Oliver, and through the use of flashbacks, we get to see how their relationship has changed over the years. And I think that that's a clever storytelling device, and I think it makes for a very personal kind of conflict. And now we're at Season 3. So Season 3 introduced a few new things. Not all of it works. The standout here is Brandon Routh as Ray Palmer, or you may know him if you're familiar with DC Comics lore as the Atom. The Atom is sort of DC's Ant-Man, although I hate to say that because the Atom came first, but it is, right? He shrinks down to nothing. Here he's used in a very strange way, which is sort of as a knockoff Iron Man, which is really a strange decision, but the point is Brandon Routh does a great job here getting to flex some of his comedic chops. And some of the other characters kind of fell out of character this year. Before we had this comedic sort of awkward character called Felicity, and in this season, I guess Ray kind of fulfills that role, so they have, given Felicity a different role, and I don't think it quite fits her character, but more on that in a minute. Basically, Arrow Season 3 is all about the showdown that Oliver has with the League of Assassins and Ra's al Ghul. Basically, the first half of the season, I'm going to say, is really good. The second half, they lose it, completely. There's no sense of mounting tension. The flashback sequences seem useless. everything just kind of is off the rails. And I don't know if it's because a lot of the key writers from the first 2 seasons of Arrow went over to The Flash, and so season 3 is a new staff of writers, or if it's just that they just didn't know what else to do with the format of the show. So at this point, what I would say is that Arrow season 4 really needs to change the format of the show. I think that at this point, it's hindering the show's success. When you look at season 3, the finale, each season has ended the season with like a big attack on the city. And in season 3, there's a throwaway line by one of the characters: "Up, it's May, must be time to attack Starling City." And I usually like it sometimes when characters are self-aware of the ridiculousness that they're in. But sometimes it's just a little too snarky and a little too like, oh, Lord. Even the writers kind of know the format of the show is keeping them down. So I feel like they really need to lose the format for season 4 and do something fresh and new, or at least make it matter again. So I think season 4 is going to require a lot of finesse to pull everything off. And season 3 very much ends on a happy note for our characters. So in order for season 4 to happen, which we know it is happening, things have to go really wrong really quick, or else we're going to have like a 8-episode arc where there is no Arrow. And that to me is dumb, because the show is Arrow and I came to watch arrows get shot at bad guys and go through their shoulders and then, wiggle the arrows around so that they hurt while you interrogate them. That's what I came to watch, not to watch a guy on a beach be like, hey, remember when I was Arrow? That was pretty cool, but I like this life better where I'm just chilling. So here's what I'm going to say, right? So if you are a completist like me and you want to watch Arrow, you're going to have a really good time with the first 2 seasons. The second half of the 3rd season, you're going to have to kind of force yourself to get through. But here's hoping that season 4 will make that worth it. I highly doubt that even if season 4 is bad that I'll stop watching, because I know in order to continue watching The Flash, I'm probably going to need to know at least a little, or maybe not need, but want to know at least a little about what's going on over with Arrow. But I may not Hulu it the very next day like I have been doing. It may not have that precedence anymore. So anyway, Flash, definitely check it out if you haven't checked it out. Like, for real, if you have to buy them on iTunes, I don't even know if they're all on Hulu anymore, but check them out, see if they are. I think they're airing reruns on the CW every week. However you have to do it, Xbox Video, whatever. However you have to do it and watch the show. Arrow, again, you're going to like the first 2 seasons. The 3rd you're going to have to get through. Here's hoping to a very successful season 4 of Arrow and season 2 of Flash. Just the sort of takeaway here is that Flash is a great show and certainly something different if you're in the mood for different superheroes. Or really, if you're just in the mood for traditional superheroes, superheroes that have a secret identity and have to juggle personal life with superhero life. If you're in the mood for something that's fun and that a hero just does it because it's the right thing to do, then The Flash is for you, because for so long we've dealt with heroes like, Iron Man, who does what he does out of guilt, or Captain America, who doesn't really have a secret identity, or heroes like Arrow, who does what he does because of something about his dad doing some bad stuff. So guilt, again, I guess. Or because, my parents are dead or whatever. This is just the Flash saying, you know what, this is the right thing to do. I can clean up this city. I have these powers that, and a good heart. And, I don't know. It's just something I've been wanting to see for a while. So for them to hit all those bullet points for me, I think really made this season stand out. So anyway, I went on way longer than I should have. I'm sure John and Hooper both put out a couple of episodes and were very short about it, but whatever, I get long-winded when I talk about The Flash. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully next week, Hooper and I will be back together again to talk about things that we've seen. I'm building up a little bit of a backlog here of reviews and stuff to talk about, so just check us out next week. And Hooper, I'm going to throw it back to you. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and Yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the weekly format. Hopefully we'll be back together soon, and we'll see you then. Bye.
As for television that I've seen, I did want to talk briefly about Eastbound and Down, which I'm pretty sure ended a couple of years ago on HBO, but I just now got all the way through to that final season. Eastbound and Down had 4 seasons total on HBO. I think that's about 40 episodes. It starred Danny McBride. A lot of people know who Danny McBride is, and Jody Hill. Sorry, it didn't star Jody Hill. It was Jody Hill's show with Danny McBride. So the two of them sort of got popular with this movie called The Foot Fist Way. So that's how Danny McBride got noticed, and that's how Jody Hill got noticed, because Will Ferrell and Adam McKay bought that film and distributed it. So these two people understand each other, and they work together really well. So there's a real comedic agreement about how to do this show. For those who don't know, Eastbound and Down is about a Major League Baseball pitcher who I just found out that Danny McBride, loosely based on John Rocker from the Atlanta Braves. Apparently he was a tremendous asshole and egomaniac. So this pitcher's name in the show is Kenny Powers, and he's just this completely narcissistic, delusional guy. And the whole show is about how he kind of fell from grace and got cut from the majors. So his whole thing is, I'm going to get my glory back. So in the first season, he's returned to his hometown to get his old girlfriend back. And so he's a teacher in the meantime. And then the second season, I believe he goes to Mexico and pitches for a team down there. And then in the third season, he finally gets on like a minor league team. And so he goes to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So it takes place there. And then at the end of that season, finally gets back with April and has a kid and everything. So it took me so long to get through the show because those second and third seasons kind of dragged for me. The first season was hilarious. I watched it with John and Dustin when we were in college, another thing we used to watch together. And it was hilarious. Like all these jokes. I mean, it's this foul-mouthed guy just sort of blowing past everybody by him and watching him deal with people who don't enable his behavior and kind of hypnotically observing the people who condone his behavior. Namely, one of the big standouts of the show is what's the actor's name? Hold on, sorry. Okay, so this actor named Steve Little in the show, he plays a character named Stevie Janowski. He shows up in the first season. He's one of the teachers at the school that Kenny starts working at, and so he kind of starts to worship Kenny Powers, and he follows him everywhere, and he does some crazier and crazier things throughout the show. And Kenny Powers is like this really, straightforward kind of guy. He's just, get off me, Stevie. You don't know what you're doing. He's cursing and all that kind of stuff, and doing drugs and all that. And Stevie Janowski is this real buttoned up kind of nerd, just kind of pasty, weird looking, oddly shaped guy. And so when he kind of starts going off the rails and basically imitating Kenny's behavior, it's real fun to watch a guy like that. It's weird to watch a guy in Dockers like snort cocaine, So the two of them make a really interesting comedic duo. But in those second and third seasons, it just kind of drags for me. I'm not sure why. I wasn't able to really have a good schedule watching it, so maybe it's just because I dipped in for an episode and then watched another one like a month later. It could just be my fault. But that fourth season is really good. It kind of brought it back for me. He starts off that first episode, and he's a family man. They have another child. It's a few years later, and he's a family man. April's like a successful realtor, I think, and he works for like a rental car company. And he's got a couple kids, and he's completely devoid of ego. But of course, when the opportunity arises for him to sort of have some fame again for the rest of the season, he kind of starts to abuse that fame. And so you really get this picture of a guy. I mean, it's all fun and games really to watch a guy act like this, but when you're trying to show the arc of a character, it's interesting to finally realize that this is a guy who wants to have it all. He wants his family, but then he realizes just normal family life is boring to him. And it really sort of strikes a chord with him when April is recognized for, I think, selling the most houses of everyone in her company. And so she's getting awarded, and she's like, oh, I couldn't do it without the support of my sweet husband, Kenny. And everyone kind of looks at him, and he sort of realizes, I want to be the one who's getting recognized. I want recognition. And you realize this guy cannot live without that kind of attention and fame. You know, he feels belittled by April's success because it's not his. So it's probably the strongest season just for him as a character, because he, you know, toward the end of the show, he reaches, you know, somewhat of an arc. And it's pretty much as believable as it could be with the tone of this show. I ultimately recommend Eastbound and Down simply because, in terms of, I mean, it's 40 episodes that are about a half hour long or less. They're not, and it's comedy. I mean, it's a funny show. So if you haven't watched Eastbound and Down, or you kind of fell off in the middle like me, get back into it, because that final season makes it really worth it. And I have to give it off to Danny McBride and Steve Little for their comedic performances, but really everyone involved in the show, I don't know, for giving it kind of a little bit of a heart at the end, I guess. It's a fun watch. So yeah, that's Eastbound and Down. So for next week's episode, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but I do know that I would like to talk about the Game of Thrones Season 5 finale. I believe that airs this Sunday, the 14th, and the Silicon Valley Season 2 finale, which airs the same day. So I will, in fact, have thoughts on both of those shows. So that's at least part of what you can look forward to for the next episode. I think that'll pretty much do it for this episode. I hope it was a nice listen. If you are a new listener, you can listen to us and you can subscribe on iTunes. Just search HooperCast, or on Podbean at hoopercastpod.podbean.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at HooperCast, or on Facebook, facebook.com/HooperCast. You can also follow us on Blogger, hoopercastpod.blogspot.com, or on Tumblr, hoopercastpod.tumblr.com. And on those last two websites, there's a donate button for PayPal in case you feel compelled to support the show financially in any sort of way. Or if you have any questions for us or comments or ideas or insults, you can email hoopercast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.